circled by flies. It's our bait. This week, there's another miracle in the tabloids. It's something folks call the roadkill Jesus Christ. The tabloids call him the I-84 Messiah. Some guy who stops along the highway whenever there's a dead animal, he lays his hands on it, and amen. The ragged car or crushed dog, even a deer folded in half by a tractor trailer, they gasp and sniff the air. They stand on their broken legs and blink their bird-pecked eyes. Folks have this on video. They have snapshots posted on the internet. The cat or porcupine or coyote, it'll stand there another minute, the roadkill Christ cradling its head in its arms, whispering to it. 2 minutes after it was shredded, fur and bones, a meal for magpies and crows, the deer or dog or raccoon will run away complete, restored, perfect. The Sarge and me, a ways down the highway from us, an old man pulls up his truck off the road. He gets out of the cab and lifts a plaid blanket out of the bed of the truck. He squats to lay the blanket on the side of the road, traffic blasting him in the hot morning air. The old man picks at the edges of the plaid blanket to uncover a dead dog, a wrinkled heap of brown fur, not too much different than any heap of fur coat. The Sarge snaps the clip out of his pistol, and it's full of bullets. He snaps the clip back home. The old man leans down, both his hands flat open on the hot asphalt, cars and trucks blasting past in both directions, and he rubs his cheek against the pile of brown fur. He stands and looks up and down the highway. He gets back into the cab of his pickup and lights a cigarette. He waits. The Sarge and I, we wait. Here we are, a week late, always one step behind, after the fact. The first sighting of the roadkill Christ, it was a crew of state workers shoveling up a dead dog a few miles from here. Before they could get it bagged, a rental car pulled over on the highway shoulder behind them. It was a man and a woman. The man driving the woman stayed in the car, and the man jumped out and ran up to the road crew. He shouted for them to wait. He said he could help. The dog was just maggots and bones inside a scrap of fur. The man was young, blonde, with his long blonde hair whipping in the wind from cars blasting past them. He had a red goatee and scars cut sideways across both cheeks, just under his eyes. The scars were dark red, and the young man reached into the garbage bag with the dead dog and told the crew it wasn't dead. And the road crew laughed. They drew their shovel into their truck, and something inside the garbage bag whimpered. It barked. Now, here and now, while I write this, while the old man sits down from the road from us, smoking, the traffic blasting past. On the other side of Interstate 84, a family in a station wagon opens a quilt on the gravel shoulder of the road, and inside is a dead orange cat. A ways from them, a woman and a child sit in lawn chairs next to a hamster on a paper towel. A ways from them, an older couple stands holding an umbrella to shade a young woman. The young woman bony and twisted sideways in a wheelchair. The old man, the mother and child, the family and older couple, their eyes can scan every car as it goes past. The roadkill Christ appears in a different car every time. A 2-door or 4-door or pickup, sometimes on a motorcycle, once in a motorhome. In the snapshots people take, in the videos, it's always the flying blonde hair, the red goatee, the scars. It's always the same man. The outline of a woman waits in the distance in a car, truck, whatever. While I'm writing this, the Sarge sights down the barrel of his pistol at our pile of fur coat. The ketchup and flies, our bait. And like everyone else here, we're waiting for a miracle. Messiah. Chapter 19. Chapter 19. Everywhere outside the car it was yellow, yellow to the horizon, not a lemon yellow, more a tennis ball yellow. It was the way the ball looks on a bright green tennis court. The world on both sides of the highway, all this one color, yellow. Billowing, foaming, big waves of yellow move in the hot wind from the cars going past, spreading from the highway's gravel shoulder to the yellow hills. Yellow. Throwing yellow light into our car. Helen, Mona, Oyster, me, all of us. Our skin and eyes, the details of the whole world. Yellow. Brassica, turn of 40. Oyster says, Moroccan mustard is in full bloom. We're in the leather smell of Helen's big realtor car with her driving. Helen and I sit up front, Oyster and Mona in the back. On the seat between Helen and me is her daily planner book, the red leather binding sticking to the brown leather seat. There's an atlas of the United States. There's a computer printout of cities with libraries that have the poems book. There's Helen's little blue purse, looking green in the yellow light. What I'd give to be a Native American, Mona says, and leans her forehead against the window. To just be a free Blackfoot or Sioux 200 years ago, just living in harmony with all that natural beauty. To see what Mona's feeling, I put my forehead against my window, against the air conditioning. The glass is blazing hot. Creepy coincidence, but the atlas shows the entire state of California colored this same bright yellow. And Oyster blows out his nose, one quick snort that rocks his head back. He shakes his fizz at Mona and says, no Indian ever lived with that. The cowboys didn't have tumbleweeds, he says. It wasn't until the late 19th century that tumbleweed seeds, Russian thistles, came over from Eurasia in the wool of sheep. Moroccan mustard came over in the dirt that sailing ships used for ballast. The silver trees out there, those are Russian olives. Elaginus augustifolia. The hundreds of white, fuzzy rabbit ears growing along the highway shoulder are Verbascum thapus. Woolly mullins. The twisted, dark trees we just passed, Robinia, pseudo acacia, black locust, the dark green brush, flowering bright yellow and Scotch broom, Cistus scoparius. They are all part of the biological pandemic, he says. Those Hollywood westerns, Oyster says, looking out the window at Nevada next to the highways, he says, with the tumbleweeds and cheatgrass and shit. He shakes his head and says, none of this is native, but it's all we have left. He says, almost nothing in nature is natural anymore. Oyster kicks the back of the front seat and says, hey Dad, what's the big daily newspaper in Nevada? Reno or Vegas, I say. And looking out the window, the reflected light making his eyes yellow, Oyster says, both. Carson City too, all of them. And I tell him, the forests along the west coast are choked with Scotch broom and French broom and English ivy and Himalayan blackberries, he says. The native trees are dying from the gypsy moths imported in 1860 by Leopold Trouvelot, who wanted to braid them for silk. The deserts and prairies are choked with mustard and cheatgrass and European peach grass. Oyster fingers open the buttons on his shirt, and inside, against the skin of his chest, is a beaded something. It's the size of a wallet, hanging around his neck from a beaded string. Hoppy medicine bag, he says. Pretty spiritual, huh? Helen, looking at him in the rearview mirror, her hands on the steering wheel in skin-tight calfskin driving gloves, she says, nice abs. Oyster shrugs his shirt off his shoulders, and the beaded bag hangs between his nipples, his chest pumped up on each side of it. The skin's tanned and hairless down to his navel. The bag's covered solid with blue beads except for a cross of red beads in the center. His tan looks orange in the yellow light. His blonde hair looks on fire. I made it, Mona says. It took me since last February. Mona rocks and crystal necklaces. I ask if she's a Hopi Indian. With his fingers, Oyster fishes around inside the bag, and Helen says, Mona, you're not a native anything. Your real last name is Steiner. You don't have to be a Hopi, Mona says. I made it from a pattern in a book. Then it's really not a Hopi anything, Helen says, and Mona says, it is. It looks just like the one in the book, she says. I'll show you. From out of his little beaded bag, Oyster takes a cell phone. The fun part about primitive crafts is they're so easy to make while you watch TV, Mona says, and they put you in touch with all sorts of ancient energies and such. Oyster flips the phone open and pulls out the antenna. He punches in a number. A curve of dirt shows under his fingernail. Helen watches him in the rear-view mirror. Mona leans forward over her knees and drags a canvas knapsack off the floor of the back seat. She takes out a tangle of cords and feathers. They look like chicken feathers, dyed bright Easter shades of pink and blue. Brass coins and beads made of black glass hang on the cords. This is a Navajo dream catcher I'm making, she says. She shakes it, and some of the cords come untangled and hang loose. Some beads fall into the knapsack in her lap. Pink feathers float loose in the chair, and she says, I thought to make it more powerful by using some I Ching coins to sort of super energize it. Somewhere under the knapsack in her lap, the shaped V between her thighs, the gas beads roll there. Into the phone, Oyster says, yeah, I need the number for the retail display advertising department at the Carson City Telegraph Star. A pink feather drifts near his face and he blows it away. With her black painted fingernails, Mona picks at some of the knots, saying it's harder than the book makes it look. Oyster's one hand holds the phone to his ear, his other hand rubs the beaded bag around his chest. Mona pulls a book out of her canvas knapsack and passes it to me in the front seat. Oyster sees Helen, still watching him in the rear-view mirror, and he winks at her and tweaks his nipple. For whatever reason, Oedipus Rex comes to mind. Somewhere below his belt, the pointed pink stalactite of his foreskin pierced with its little steel ring. How could Helen want that? Old-time ranchers planted cheatgrass because it would green up fast in the spring and provide early forage for the grazing cattle. Oyster says, nodding his head at the world outside. This first batch of cheatgrass was in southern British Columbia, Canada in 1889, but fire spreads it every year. It dries to gunpowder, and now land that used to burn every 10 years, it burns every year. And the cheatgrass recovers fast. Cheatgrass loves fire. But the native plants, the sagebrush and the desert phlox, they don't. And every year it burns, there's more cheatgrass and less anything else. And the deer and antelope that depended on those other plants are gone now. So are the rabbits, so are the hawks and owls that ate the rabbits. The mice starve, so the snakes that ate the mice starve. Today, cheatgrass dominates the inland deserts from Canada to Nevada, covering an area over twice the size of the state of Nebraska and spreading by thousands of acres per year. The big irony is even cattle ate cheatgrass, Oyster says, so cows, they eat the rare native bunch grasses, what's left of them. Mona's book is called Traditional Tribal Hobby Crafts. When I open it, more pink and blue feathers drift out. Now, my new life's dream is I want to find a really straight tree, Mona says, a pink feather caught in her dreadlocks, and make a totem pole or something. When you think about it from a native plant perspective, Oyster says, Johnny Appleseed was a fucking biological terrorist. Johnny Appleseed, he says, might as well be handing out smallpox. Oyster's punching another number on his cell phone. He kicks the back of the front seat and says, Mom, Dad, what's a really posh restaurant in Reno, Nevada? And Helen shrugs and looks at me. She says, the Desert Sky Supper Club in Tahoe is very nice. Into his cell phone, Oyster Oyster says, "I'd like to place a 3-column display ad." Looking out the window, he says, "It should be 3 columns by 6 inches deep, and the top line of copy should read, 'Attention patrons of the Desert Sky Supper Club.'" Oyster says, "The second line should say, 'Have you recently contracted a near-fatal case of Campylobacter food poisoning? If so, please call the following number to be part of a class action lawsuit.'" Then Oyster gives a phone number. He fishes a credit card out of his medicine bag and reads a number and expiration date into the phone. He says for the account rep to call him after it's typeset and check the final ad copy over the phone. He says for the ad to run every day for the next week in the restaurant section. He flips the phone shut and presses the antenna back inside. "The way yellow fever and smallpox killed off your Native Americans," he says. "We brought Dutch elm disease to America in a shipment of logs for a veneer meal in 1930 and brought chestnut blight in 1904. Another pathogenic fungus is killing off the eastern beaches. The Asian longhorn beetle, introduced in New York in 1996, is expected to wipe out North American maples. To control prairie dog populations," Oyster says, "ranchers introduced the bubonic plague to the prairie dog colonies, and by 1930, about 98% of the dogs were dead. The plague has spread to kill another 34 species of native rodents, and every year a few unlucky people. For whatever reason, the calling song comes to mind." "Me," Mona says as I pass her back the book, "I like the ancient traditions. My hope is this trip will be like my own personal vision quest, and I'll come up with an Indian name and be transformed." Out of his hobby bag, Oyster takes a cigarette and says, "You mind?" And I tell him yes. And Ellen says, "Not at all," and it's her car. And I'm counting 1, counting 2, counting 3. "What we think of as nature," Oyster says, "everything's just more of us killing the world. Every dandelion's a ticking time bomb. Biological pollution, pretty yellow devastation. The way you can go to Paris or Beijing," Oyster says, "and everywhere there's a McDonald's hamburger. And this is the ecological equivalent of franchised life forms. Every place is the same place. Kudzu, zebra mussels, water hyacinths, starlings, Burger Kings. The local natives, anything unique gets squeezed out. The only biodiversity we're going to have left," he says, "is Coke versus Pepsi." He says, "We're landscaping the whole world one stupid mistake at a time." Just staring out his window, Oyster takes a plastic cigarette lighter out of the beaded medicine bag. He shakes the lighter, smacking it against the palm of one hand. A pink feather from the book, I sniff it and imagine Mona's hair has this same type of smell. Twirling the feather between 2 fingers, I ask Oyster on the phone just now, his call to the newspaper, what he's up to. Oyster lights his cigarette. He tucks the plastic lighter and the cell phone back in his medicine bag. "It's how he makes money," Mona says. She's picking apart the tangles and knots in her dream catcher. Between her arms, inside her orange blouse, her breasts reach out with their little pink nipples, and I'm counting 4, counting 5, counting 6. Both his hands buttoning his shirt, his mouth pinched around the cigarette and his eyes squinting against the smoke, Oyster says, "Remember Johnny Appleseed?" Helen turns up the air conditioning, and buttoning his collar, Oyster says, "Don't worry, Dad. This is just me planting my seeds." Looking out at all the yellow with his yellow eyes, he says, "It's just my generation trying to destroy the existing culture by spreading our own contagion." Sorry about the noise of my dog eating in the background. I can't control when he eats. He doesn't eat as soon as the bowl is filled up with food. He's not food crazy or motivated. Anyway, this is chapter 20. The woman opens her front door, and here are Helen and I on her front porch. Me carrying Helen's as Helen points the long pink nail of her index finger and says, "If you can give me 15 minutes, I can give you a whole new you." Helen's suit is red, but not a strawberry red. It's more the red of a strawberry mousse, topped with whipped cream fresh, and served in a steamed crystal compote. Inside her pink cloud of hair, her earrings sparkle pink and the red in the sunlight. The woman's drying her hands in a kitchen towel. She's wearing men's brown moccasins with no socks. A bib apron patterned with little yellow chickens covers her whole front, and some kind of machine washable dress underneath. With the back of one hand, she pushes some hair off her forehead. The yellow chickens are all holding kitchen tools, ladles and spoons in their beaks. Looking at us through the rusted screen door, the woman says, "Yes." Helen looks back at me standing behind her. She looks back over her shoulder at Mona and Oyster, tucked down, hiding in the car parked at the curb. Oyster whispering into his phone. Is the itching constant or intermittent? Helen Hoover Boyle brings the fingertips of one hand together at her chest, the mess of pink gems and pearls hiding her skin, her silk blouse underneath. She says, "Miss Belson, we're here from Miracle Makeover." As she talks, Helen throws her closed hand toward the woman as if she's scattering the words. Helen says, "My name is Brenda Williams." With her pink fingertips, she scatters the words back over her shoulder, saying, "And this is my husband, Robert Williams." She says, "And we have a very special gift for you today." The woman inside the screen door looks down at the cosmetic case in my hand, and Helen says, "May we come in?" It was supposed to be easier than this. This whole traveling around, just dropping into libraries, taking a book off the shelf, sitting on a toilet in the library room and cutting out the page, then flush. It was supposed to be that quick. The first couple libraries, no problem. The next, the book isn't on the shelf. In library whispers, Mona and I go to the checkout desk and ask. Helen's waiting in the car with Oyster. The librarian's a guy with his long straight hair pulled back in a ponytail. He's got earrings in both ears, pirate loop earrings, and he's wearing a plaid sweater vest and says the book is, he scrolls up and down his computer screen, the book is checked out. "It's really important," Mona says. "I had it before that and I left something between the pages." "Sorry," the guy says. "Can you tell us who has it?" Mona says. And the guy says, "Sorry, no can do." And I'm counting 1. Counting 2, counting 3. Sure, everybody wants to play God, but for me, it's a full-time job. I'm counting 4, I'm counting 5. A beat later, Helen Hoover Boyle's standing. She smiles until the librarian looks up from the computer and she spreads her hands, her rings bright and crowded on each finger. She smiles and says, "Young man, my daughter left an old family photograph between the pages of a certain book." She wiggles her fingers and says, "You can follow the rules, or you can do a good deed and take your pick." The librarian watches her fingers, the prism colors and stars of broken light dancing across his face. He licks his lips, then he shakes his head no, and says it's just not worth it. The person with the book will complain, and he'll get fired. We won't lose you your job. In the car, I, waiting with Mona, counting 27, counting 28, counting 29, trying the only way I know not to kill everybody in the library and look up the address on the computer myself. Helen comes out to the car with a sheet of paper in her hand. She leans in the open driver's side window and says, "Good news and bad news." Mona and Oyster are lying across the back seat and they sit up. I'm on the shotgun side of the front seat, counting. And Mona says they have 3 copies, but they're all checked out. And Helen gets in behind the steering wheel and says, "I know a million ways to cold call." And Oyster shakes the hair off his eyes and says, "Good job, Mom." The first house went easy enough, and the second. In the car between house calls, Helen picks through the gold tubes and shiny boxes. Her lipstick and makeup, her cosmetic case, open in her lap. She twists a pink lipstick and squints at it, saying, "I'm never using any of this again." If I'm not mistaken, that last woman had a ringworm. Mona leans forward from the back seat, looking over Helen's shoulder and says, "You're really good at this." Screwing open the little round boxes of eyeshadow, looking and sniffing at their tan or pink or peach insides, Helen says, "I've had a lot of practice." Screwing open little round boxes of eyeshadow, looking and sniffing at their tan or pink or peach insides, Helen says, "I've had a lot of practice." She looks at herself in the rearview mirror and pulls around a few strands of pink hair. She looks at her watch, pinching the face between a thumb and index finger, and she says, "I shouldn't tell you this, but this was my first real job." By now, we're parked outside a rusted trailer house, sitting in a square of dead grass scattered with children's plastic toys. Helen snaps her case shut. She looks at me sitting beside her and says, "You ready to try it again?" Inside the trailer, talking to the woman in the apron covered with little chickens, Helen's saying there's absolutely no cost or obligation on your part, and she backs the woman into the sofa. Sitting across from the woman sitting so close their knees almost touch, Helen reaches toward her with a soft brush and says, "Suck in your cheeks, dear." With one hand, she grabs a handful of the woman's hair and pulls it straight up in the air. The woman's hair is blonde with an inch of brown at the roots. With her other hand, Helen runs a comb down the hair in fast strokes, holding the longer strands up and crushing the shorter brown ones down against the scalp. She grabs another handful of rats, teases, back combs until all but the longest hairs are crushed and tangled along the scalp. With the comb, she smooths the long blonde strands of the ratted and short hairs until the woman's head is a huge fluffed bubble of blonde hair. And I say, "So that's how you do that." It's identical to Helen's hairdo, only blonde. On the coffee table in front of the sofa is a big arrangement of roses and lilies, but wilted and brown, the flowers standing in a green glass vase from a florist, with only a little black water in the bottom. On the dinette table in the kitchen are more big flower arrangements, just dead sticks in thick, sinking water. Lined up on the floor against the back wall of the living room are more vases, each holding a block of green foam, pin-cushioned with curled, wasted roses or black, spindly carnations growing gray mold. Stuck in with each bouquet is a little card saying, "In deepest sympathy." And Helen says, "Now put your hands over your face." And she starts shaking a can of hairspray. She fogs the woman's hair with spray. The woman cowers blind, bent forward a little with both hands pressed over her face. And Helen jerks her head toward the rooms at the other end of the trailer. And I go, pumping a mascara brush in its tube. She says, "You don't mind if my husband uses your bathroom, do you?" Helen says, "Now look up at the ceiling, dear." In the bathroom, there are dirty clothes separated into different colored piles on the floor. Whites, darks, somebody's jeans and shirts stained with oil. There's towels and sheets and bras. There's a red checked tablecloth. I flush the toilet for the sound effect. There's no diapers or children's clothes in the living room. The chicken woman is still looking at the ceiling, only now she's shaking with long jerking breaths, her chest under the apron shaking. Helen is touching the corner of a folded tissue into the watery makeup. The tissue is soaked in black with mascara, and Helen's saying, "It will be better someday, Rhonda. You can't see it, but it will." Folding another tissue and daubing, she says, "What you have to do is make yourself hard. Think of yourself as something hard and sharp." She says, "You're still a young woman, Rhonda. You need to go back to school and turn this hurt into money." The chicken woman, Rhonda, is still crying with her head tilted back, staring at the ceiling. Behind the bathroom, there's 2 bedrooms. One has a waterbed. In the other bedroom is a crib and a hanging mobile of plastic daisies. There's a chest of drawers painted white. The crib is empty. The little plastic mattress is tied up in a roll at one end. Near the crib is a stack of books on a stool. Poems and Rhymes is on top. When I put the book on the dresser, it falls. I run the point of a baby pin down the inside edge of the page, tight in next to the binding, and the page pulls out. When the page folded in my pocket, I put the book back in the sack. cosmetics are dumped in a heap on the floor. Helen's pulled a false bottom out of the inside of her cosmetic case. Inside are layered necklaces and bracelets, heavy brooches, and pairs of earrings clipped together, all of them crusted and dazzling with shattered red and green, yellow and blue lights, jewels. Draped between Helen's hands is a long necklace of yellow and red stones larger than her polished pink fingernails. In brilliant cut diamonds, she says, "Look for no light leakage through the facets below the girdle of the stone." She lays the necklace in the woman's hand, saying, in rubies, aluminum oxide, foreign bits inside, called rutile inclusions, can give the stone a soft pinkish look unless the jeweler bakes the stone under high heat. The trick to forgetting the big picture is to look at everything close up. The two women sit so close their knees dovetail together, their heads almost touch. The chicken woman isn't crying. The chicken woman is wearing a jeweler's loop in one eye. The dead flowers are shoved aside and scattered. On the coffee table are clusters of sparkling pink and smooth gold, cool white pearls, and carved blue lapis lazuli. Other clusters glow orange and yellow. Other piles shine silver and white. And Helen cups a blazing green egg in her hand, so bright both women look green in the reflected light, and she says, "Do you see the kind of uniform veil-like inclusions in a synthetic emerald?" Her eye clenched around the loop. The woman nods, and Helen says, "Remember this. I don't want you to get burned the way I did." She reaches into the cosmetic case and lifts out a bright handful of yellow, saying, "This yellow sapphire brooch was owned by the movie star Natasha Wren." With both hands, she takes out a sparkling pink heart, trailing a long chain of smaller diamonds, saying, "This 700-carat beryl pendant was once owned by Queen Marie of Romania." In this heap of jewels, Helen Hoover Boyle would say, are the ghosts of everyone who has everyone rich and successful enough to prove it, all of their talent and intelligence and beauty outlived by a decorative junk. All the success and accomplishment this jewelry was supposed to represent, it's all vanished. With the same hairdo, the same makeup, leaning together so close they could be sisters. They could be mother and daughter, before and after, past and future. There's more, but that's when I go out to the car. Sitting in the backseat, Mona says, "You find it?" And I say, "Yeah, not that it does this woman any good. The only thing we've given her is big hair and probably ringworm." Oyster says, "Show us the song. Let's see what this trip is all about." And I tell him, "No fucking way." I tuck the folded page in my mouth and chew and chew. My foot aches and I take off my shoe. I chew and chew. Mona falls asleep. I chew and chew. Oyster looks out the window at some weeds in a ditch. I swallow the page and I fall asleep. Later, sitting in the car, driving to the next town, the next library, maybe the next makeover, I wake up and Helen has been driving for almost 300 miles. It's almost dark, and just looking out the windshield, she says, "I'm keeping track of expenses." Mona sits up, scratching her scalp through her hair. She presses the finger next to her pinky finger. She presses the pad of that finger into the inside corner of her eye and pulls it away fast, with an eye goop stuck on it. She wipes the goober on her jeans and says, "Where are we going to eat?" I tell Mona to buckle her seatbelt. Helen turns on the headlights. She opens one hand wide against the steering wheel and looks at the back of it, her rings, and says, "After we find the Book of Shadows, we are the all-powerful leaders of the entire world. After we're immortal and we own everything on the planet and everyone loves us," she says, "you'll still owe me for $200 worth of cosmetics." She looks odd. Her hair looks wrong. It's her earrings, the heavy clumps of pink and red, pink sapphires and rubies. They're gone. Okay, we're gonna end it there. Let me know if there's any way you want me to improve the way I do this whisper reading. Thank you.